In this session, we'll talk about dark triad, the dark side of human personality. Consistently in this class, one theme has been to discuss counterproductive behaviors in organizations. So, following this trend, we will also discuss personality themes that go with these dark behaviors. In organizational behavior research, unlike core psychology research, we are interested in behaviors. And then when we explore these behaviors, we also try to think about what can cause these behaviors. So, if behaviors are dependent variables or outcome variables, then personality is one important predictor variable or independent variable. In recent years, organizational behavior researchers have paid great attention to studying counterproductive behaviors in organization, unethical behaviors, and within this theme, of course, the focus has been on personality traits that increase the propensity of engaging in such behaviors. If you recall, in the first part of this class, we talked about a research study conducted in 2004 that looked at the most important predictor of counterproductive behaviors, and that research showed that self-control was one of the predictor that will determine if an employee will engage in such behaviors. Similarly, other researchers have looked at various important personality traits as well. Within this domain, dark triad has emerged as an important framework that presents three important personality traits that can predict unethical or counterproductive behaviors in organizations. These three traits include Machiavellianism, Narcissism, and Sociopathy. In this session, I'll provide you an overview of these personality traits. Let's start with Machiavellianism. Have you heard of Niccolo Machiavelli? In 1513, Niccolo Machiavelli wrote a book, Prince. In this book, he advised his prince how to gain power and success. If you watch the sci-fi TV series Extant, in one of the episodes, the female cyborg Lucy is shown to be reading Machiavelli to become more manipulative. One example of Machiavelli's philosophy is his reply to the question whether it's better to be loved than feared. Machiavelli responded, "It is far better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." He reasoned that love is secured by a bond of gratitude which men, wretched creatures they are, break when it is to their advantage to do so. But fear is strengthened by a dread of punishment which is always effective. In this sense, Machiavelli's philosophy had a very cynical view of human nature, and he wanted to take advantage of this cynical view by being very manipulative. And his philosophy was that if you have to lie to people in order to get what you want, you should do that. So basically, he preached amoral realism. He preached ambition without any ethics. Therefore, keeping in view his philosophy in psychology, individuals who display this type of amoral realism and who have this extreme cynical view of human nature are called Machiavellian or simply high Mach individuals. High Mach individuals have several characteristics. First of all, their thinking is very cynical. In terms of emotion, they feel great amount of contempt for fellow human beings. And the characteristic behaviors that they display include they win more often, they persuade more often, but they are not easily influenced by others because they don't trust others and they don't respect others to be influenced by them. In terms of their attitudes, they generally don't like their jobs because they're so cynical of everything and they are distrustful and highly neurotic individuals. So, in short, these individuals will not shy away from taking advantage of any situation by cheating, lying, pretending to be your friends, and then in the end getting what they want. Now, our second trait, before we discuss this, I would like you to answer this question. To what extent do you agree with the statement, I am a narcissist? On a scale of 1 to 7, please rate this. 1 being it's not at all true of me, and 7 being very true of me. This single item questionnaire is developed by Ohio State researchers who believe that this single question can show how narcissist individuals are. In a series of 11 experiments that involved more than 2,000 individuals from varying ages and professions, they could reliably identify narcissistic people by asking them this exact same question that I asked you. Results showed that people's answer to this question lined up very closely with several other validated measures of narcissism. Some of these scales include as many as 20 items. So chances are that whatever your answer was is reflective of how narcissistic you are. But what is this narcissism? Narcissism is defined as grandiose perception of yourself and your willingness to exploit others because of these perceptions. You think so highly of yourself that you have this immense sense of entitlement that rules do not apply to you and the other human beings basically exist to serve your needs. On the surface, it might appear that these grandiose perception of self emerge from very high self-esteem. But in fact, researchers have shown that narcissistic individuals have very unstable self-esteem which actually does not have any solid core. This very inflated view of self is very delicate. And the moment somebody questions the greatness of this self, a narcissist would react very intensely because his self view is shaken. They might have an outburst of anger toward you. Now, in general, people who have stable and high self-esteem, it stems from something real. For example, maybe you have an established record of some skill or success in your life, and that over the years has given you a good self-esteem. A healthy self-esteem would be stable and would not be easily shaken by the challenges that you will face in life. But in case of narcissists, these perceptions, as we discussed, are unstable because they do not have any solid basis. And therefore, narcissistic personalities, if they exist in workplace, they would think that rules don't apply to them, and they would, without any scruples, will break the law if it favors them, and they would engage in unethical behaviors because rules must be bent for them. The final trait is sociopathy. Individuals with high levels of sociopathy are characterized by arrogance. Like high MAC individuals, they are also manipulative. They engage in serial lying. But unlike high MAC individuals, they are not neurotic. They have very low levels of anxiety. They also have lack of empathy for others. They do not feel any guilt or remorse. These are characteristics of sociopathic individuals. Also, they have this great impulsivity and immediate gratification needs. In other words, they are thrill seekers. And this is also what sets them apart from high max. Hollywood has given us a very twisted image of what sociopaths are. Perhaps based on these media images, we think that sociopaths are some quirky individuals who sit alone in the basement planning who to torture next. But in fact, sociopaths are just normal people who exist all around us. You don't have to be a serial killer to be a sociopath. To be sociopath, you need to have this psychology of manipulativeness where you have no sympathy for others and you therefore take advantage of these individuals. If you have heard of Bernie Madoff, who was this financial schemer who was arrested in 2008, he fooled the investors for 2 decades, and nobody was able to realize that this person is running a great Ponzi scheme. So, in many ways, when you analyze the counts of people who met him, you would see these elements of sociopathy in them. For example, one of the journalists described that in one of the interviews when he was talking to Bernie Madoff about how is he doing this, how is he able to give so much profit to his investors when the stock market is down, and he was trying to probe him and figure out what's going on. He said that Bernie never showed any elements of fear or nervousness, and this exactly shows this high level of emotional stability these individuals have. They are not neurotic. Similarly, when his victims faced him during his trials, he did not seem to exhibit any guilt or remorse. So overall, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sociopathy make three personality traits in the dark triad. Now, how are these three related? Research has shown that these are distinct personality traits, although they have some overlapping elements. For example, sociopathy and narcissism has a correlation of 0.50, and this perhaps stems from the fact that both share this sense of entitlement and tendency of self-promotion. Similarly, narcissism and Machiavellianism has a weak correlation of 0.26. Similarly, psychopathy and Machiavellianism have a correlation of 0.30, and both traits share cynicism, callousness, mistrust, and contemptuousness. Now let's also look at what is distinctive in all these three personality traits. The quintessential characteristic of sociopathy is lack of empathy or their callousness. They're really cruel. Then the essence of those high in narcissism is their sense of entitlement, that they deserve more than others. Finally, high max can be defined by their manipulativeness. This is their quintessential traits. Before we end, let's also talk about how these three traits are related to big five personality traits. Remember, we talked about the different combination of big five traits can also be related to other behaviors or personality traits. So in organizational behavior research, as big five personality framework is one of the most used and fundamental framework. Therefore, researchers always like to compare it with other personality traits. So if you look at this table, you would notice that all the three traits in the dark triad are negatively correlated with agreeableness, which basically means that disagreeableness is one of the fundamental characteristic of dark triad. Then psychopaths are emotionally stable. They are not neurotic, but the other two traits are positively correlated with neuroticism. Similarly, Machiavellianism and psychopathy are low on conscientiousness. In fact, as we discussed earlier, conscientiousness is one of the traits that is important in curbing the counterproductive work behaviors. Similarly, if you recall the research that talked about lack of self-control is an important predictor of counterproductive behaviors, then you would see that how it is related to conscientiousness, because self-control is an important facet of conscientiousness. Finally, openness to experience also plays an important role in the sense that narcissism and psychopathy both show high openness to experience. So this comparison basically gives an idea of the profile of a dark triad in terms of how they relate to big five personality traits. With this, we end our session. I will encourage you to look at PowerPoint notes in order to review these personality traits.